When life happens, plans need to change. Shaping Change, hosted by certified financial planner Ross Marino, is dedicated to helping financial advisors better serve their clients when life takes those unexpected turns.
Welcome to the Shaping Change Show. Today, I am joined by Dr. Moira Somers, author of Advice That Sticks. Hello, Moira.
Hi there, Ross.
Thanks for being on the show today. Love the book Advice That Sticks. I know it was on Michael Kitz's summer reading list. Was that last summer or summer before?
Can't remember. The last summer of normalcy. It was on the reading list.
Love it. Last summer of normalcy. It was great. What I loved about the book is that it talks about helping financial advisors give financial advice that people will follow. And what a great way to phrase it, because I know I've given a lot of advice over the years. Some of it was actually followed, and I'm pretty sure that's the most effective advice that I've given. Now, you have a history within this industry. You've been helping financial planners help their clients and understand how clients think for many years, but you didn't start in this industry. Can you go back a little bit and take us to where your career started and how you ended up helping financial advisors?
Sure. Well, to this day, I remain a clinician for part of the week, just so I can keep it really real on how hard it can be to work with folks and just how hard it can be to be human sometimes, to have challenging family, to have health conditions, or to undergo an accident, to go through setbacks, as well as how delightful it can be to be human, to have breakthroughs, to fall in love, to meet goals, to, the whole catastrophe, the full catastrophe, as Zorro said. So I started out as a neuropsychologist, a clinical neuropsychologist. And as I said, I continue to do that to this day. I work with people who've had very significant neurological diseases and mental health problems. I do work with people who've been diagnosed with conditions like dementia, multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, people who've gone through traumatic brain injuries. That part of my job is rarely a laugh riot, but it's very meaningful and rich. And it's there that I began to really understand that it's not enough to have deep subject matter expertise in anything. That what really mattered was understanding what patients in this case were ready for, and how it is that I could meet them where they were in their life journey, in their struggles, with their particular constellation of strengths, and help them make tweaks, help them follow through on things that other members of a multidisciplinary team might be recommending to them, help them figure out where the stuck points were and how to get them unstuck, using both their own resources as well as other people on the team, other people in the network, how to set up the environment so that the right thing could happen. So that's my background. That came on the heels of doing a doctoral dissertation on procrastination, which of course is all about the difficulty we have sometimes following through on our own best intentions for our lives, let alone what somebody else might advise us, just what we ourselves thought we ought to be doing. So those are the waters I've been swimming in for a long time.
And over time, you pivoted to helping financial advisors, financial planners work with their clients. And what I know you and I have discussed is how financial planners really are on the front lines. And we talk to our clients frequently, but not every day. So if you talk to someone once a quarter, maybe a couple times a year, it's often apparent to us when their faculties are all of a sudden diminished. We know immediately when someone who's never missed a phone call appointment all of a sudden completely forgets that they had an appointment, or something else just seems amiss. And that really influenced what you do for us. So can you talk a little bit about that epiphany?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a couple of calls to do assessments on people whose difficulties had been brought to light by their financial advisors. So advisors who had requests to release large sums of money to total strangers that had never been part of the patient's life before. And so, they were concerned they were being financially abused, as well as people who were calling their advisors asking for the same thing repeatedly. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? Not in a fretful way, but in truly an uncomprehending way. If I can make that distinction. And so it's combined with my own observations that people's relationship to money was in some ways just as profound a predictor of health outcomes as their level of socioeconomic status. That it didn't just matter what you had, it mattered how you interacted with that money. And it mattered how you had discussions about your financial situation with the people you loved. And although for a long time, psychologists have known that money is identified as the single biggest source of stress in people's lives, Russ, none of us actually ever get any training on what to do about that. I can treat a spider phobia more than, or a foot fetish more than I can treat somebody's financial anxiety based on what I came out of graduate school with. The longer I was in clinical practice, the more I realized, okay, this is something that I can't ignore anymore as a psychologist. I have to get better at the financial part of these discussions. And then the flip side of that was realizing that, and financial planners need to know more about what to do about that human side of the money experience. So together we made the perfect peanut butter cup of a career path.
And as you mature in this business, I think the human side just becomes more and more apparent as a financial planner. Now, obviously, we have to be technicians. We earn certified financial planner designations. It's drinking from a fire hose, but fantastic courses, great immersion. But it can only do so much on the personal side. And a lot of that I know just comes from experience and maturity. You're able to come from the human side, and then it's glaring to you because you realize how it interacts and you see the struggles that people may have. So I love the work that you do, and also the Financial Transitionist Institute. You're involved with that. And out of that, you ended up writing a book, Advice That Sticks. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The head of the Financial Transitionist Institute is Susan Bradley, and she nudged me repeatedly to do it. And as I've said to you, Susan is she who must be obeyed. So I obeyed. The notion that the personal side isn't just something that you're born with or something that, your mama taught you how to hold a fork properly. It's learning how to listen. That's a teachable skill. Learning how to develop your own emotional intelligence, to know what's going on for you, what's being stirred up in you. First of all, to recognize that, and then to manage it, and to recognize what's going on in other people, and to work effectively with that, to help settle people, to help people tap into their own motivation, to help them make better decisions. All of those things are learnable, and it's just such a joy to be involved in the teaching of them. I think to this day, to get a CFP designation, I don't think you need to take any courses in basic communication. I don't think that's part of the curriculum. But what's interesting, though, is that it certainly is part of the standards. Right? And implementation follow through is part of the new and revised standards. So this notion that it's not okay just to be, the human equivalent of a gumball dispenser, where it's like, okay, you put in you twist my knob and I give you the best advice, and then you go off with your gumball. The standards now say that the professional has to determine whose job is it to implement, and to make sure that it does get implemented, to make sure that it does get done. You're not being a true fiduciary unless you're doing that kind of stuff. So it's kind of weird. I can't imagine as many other professions where you're being held to a standard that you were never trained to. So it's good that we've got other things like podcasts and conferences so that people can develop training in what they're being held to.
Well, the world of transitions is in the forefront now. I don't think we've ever had as much unexpected change or as much uncertainty. Certainly it's unprecedented in my career. And I go back to the late 1980s for this, when I started at age 9. But we've got many decades here as a financial planner. I've never had so many people feel uncertain and talk about what might be coming down the road. And the transitions, I just think they're more important than ever. And I know you have a great view of just the landscape out there within our industry. So can you talk about just this environment?
Sure. When I think about transition, I don't think about just kind of run-of-the-mill change. I think about the transitions that really affect financial planning in terms of those events that change people's identity. So if I move from one financial firm to another as an employee, if I move from one home to another, I don't necessarily undergo a change of identity. But if I go from being single to married, that's a change in identity. If I go from childless to raising children, that parent thing is now a new label, and it changes my sense of myself. If I go from being a captain of industry to being retired and feeling kind of anonymous, that's a change in identity. So those are the kinds of transitions that I'm really interested in, are the ones that feel like something is changing at such a fundamental level, not only in terms of how I identify myself, but in terms of how I'm expected to act, what the norms are for other people with that identity, where I derive my meaning, and where I put my resources. Those are some of the key differentiators of transition events versus lesser life change events.
And that's certainly what we're seeing for many people, the identity change, the life changes that are so dramatic that who they are becomes challenged or just changed, and they know it, and then they have to figure that out, and trying to make financial decisions in the midst of all that. It's incredibly challenging, isn't it?
You know, COVID came upon us so rapidly. So unless you happened to work at the Center for Disease Control or the World Health Organization, which has known for a long time there'll be some event sometime like this, most of us just went, holy cow, and had to adapt as we went. I think the similarity is that many of us have learned that flexibility is key to making these changes, and flexibility is also key to making successful life transitions. There's a certain amount of anticipation that we have for certain events. So retirement would probably be the financial planner's standard transition that they help people for. And that one's got you can see that a long time off, usually. But other events are just boom, they just come on you, like the person you thought you were connected to forever tells you he wants out of the marriage, or the love of your life dies, or the big money event that you thought was going to be coming your way through the sale of a business falls through. So sometimes we get the advantage of anticipation and planning, and sometimes those things come as welcomed events, and then sometimes they are dreaded. So we've got a long period of kind of unhappy anticipation. Other time, the events just come upon us. And to be able to have this sense of, regardless of how it comes upon us, to have a sense that we have what it takes to get through, and that we will pivot, sorry to use that word, but we will we will change in response to what's coming our way. We'll be willing to adapt if what we thought we were aiming for has proven to be impossible for us to get to. Those are some of the key qualities, that sense of I can do this, as well as, and if I have to change in order to be well in light of this, I can do that too.
I recently interviewed Dr. Kelly Crace from William and Mary, and we talked a lot about flourishing and the characteristics of people who flourish during transitions. And he really puts an emphasis on intention and work. And you're not born Superman or Superwoman when it comes to this. You really have to put some effort into it. And I know you've done work on people who are on the opposite end of the spectrum, people who aren't necessarily flourishing, but they're struggling. And it may be simple to say, well, they're not being as intentional or doing the work, but I don't think that tells me much. I want to be able to observe and help people when I see them in this situation. So can you talk about some of the characteristics of the people that aren't flourishing, that are struggling? And then we'll go into, is there anything a financial planner can do to help?
Sure. Well, Dr. Crace is absolutely right. There isn't sort of a resilience, a robust resilience personality characteristic that stays stable across time. It's not something like, I don't know, what are the big five? Introversion or extroversion, openness to experience. Even those are known to undergo some morphing over time, but there isn't an equivalent in the resilience or the flourishing dimension. The fact is that resilience or flourishing waxes and wanes in direct response to what we do, in direct response to the situations that we put ourselves in, and in direct response to how much social support we have. So no matter, if somebody has been an underdog in the resilience department, those folks can turn around and surprise the heck out of you. And similarly, somebody that you thought was the Rock of Gibraltar can also crumble in front of you. So what do we look for? We know that in terms of transitions, there are some people who make transitions less successfully than others, or who are statistically more likely to struggle. And those include younger people. That includes people with fewer economic resources. It includes people who have multiple negative transition events piled up on top of each other, So somebody who's just retired from a career that they didn't want to retire from, or lost a job and then lost a house, or somebody who has gone through a long and prolonged illness with a spouse or a child, and then lost that person, and then lost the network, the normal social network that goes with being part of a couple or part of a school community, for example. So younger, fewer economic resources, multiple negative transition events stacked up on top of each other, that puts you in a group that is more likely to struggle. But more than all of those other things combined, the research that has come out of the work we're doing at the Sudden Money Institute, or the Financial Transitionist Institute, as it's called now, is that it's the people who struggle to find meaning, who can't make sense of what is going on for them. And that meaning doesn't have to be something really profound, like the Almighty picked me out. It can be something like, yeah, crap happens and it just happened to be my turn. Like even that amount of even that amount of explanation seems to settle people. It's the folks who are just spinning, trying to figure out, who am I now? And what does this mean? And why did it happen to me? And who can't seem to answer that. Those are the folks who really, really struggle in transitions. That, at least from our first round of research, that seems to be the case.
I'm sure most financial planners have experience with people like that, where it may not come up with every conversation, but we certainly are exposed to those types of conversations where there are people that 5 years, 10 years after a major event, and they're still struggling. And it's something that's always baffled me. Not that I'm wondering why are they like this. It's what is it that is preventing them? What is their obstacle? Why is it so hard to move through? And it's complex. I'm my favorite saying here is #clueless. Right. The more you learn, the more you realize just gaps. There's gaps everywhere, Moira. There are just so many things that once you fill a gap with a piece of knowledge, you think, oh, I get it. Well, there's still 100 other gaps in whatever the topic is, at least. So you struggle with that and you want to reach out and help those people.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to pivot back to with the book, Advice That Sticks, and the follow through. And I saw a recent announcement, which is a new venture of yours or a new opportunity with the company Knudge.
Yes.
I'd been watching that company, love Knudge, love what they're doing. I've read, I followed a little bit, and then all of a sudden I saw your name attached to it. And I thought, okay, now I got a deep dive. Dr. Moira's involved. They got things going on. So can you tell us about what's happening at Knudge?
Sure. So this is company Knudge with a K, Knudge, like Knight. And their whole raison d'etre is to help people follow through. So you can see why I was just so excited to learn about their existence. So in medicine, what used to be called compliance or non-compliant patients, that had a little too much of a heavy-handed power dynamic attached to those words. Bad Hogan's Heroes episodes about having ways to make you comply, I think, made them go to the language of adherence. What makes it possible for patients to adhere to a treatment protocol? And along with that change in terminology was a recommendation that adherence is only possible in the context of having a mutually agreed upon treatment protocol. That in order for the starting point for follow through is that the patient understands why, that it's landing on that not only do they know why you're recommending this, but they agree with it. And no, they don't have a medical degree, but boy, do they have expertise on their own life circumstances that the practitioner can't even begin to hope to have, right? And so what we found out in the medical literature was that so much more depends on the skill of the advisor, the skill of the advice giver, and the circumstances in which the patient is located, and how complex the advice is, and whether there is skill in the advice giver at being sensitive to those situational things and sensitive to how to break down complex advice into simpler steps, right? We found out that counts for more of the follow through than does any single patient characteristic. And, as somebody who works in the medical field, I could have sworn that there were just some people out there who were ornery and they were just out to give me a bad day. And if they would just listen to me. But, the more that I sort of sat with those findings, sat with the data, I recognized, I do have to be willing to enter into their phenomenological world at least long enough to be able to make sure that we've got a shared vision of what's going on here. And then beyond that, that's just the beginning, because sometimes what makes people not follow through with advice isn't that they've decided, I changed my mind. It's that it got kicked off the radar. They forgot. There were competing demands on their time, their energy, their money, right? Has that ever happened to you? It happens to me all the time. Like, that was 3 times a week. I told the personal trainer I'd be working out. It's not even that I just sort of blow it off. It's that I forget sometimes. And so Knudge came along with their desire to just simply, it's a really simple business strategy, right? Which is to help advisors and their clients manage the to-do list. Which means, how do we help stuff from falling off the radar? And how do we ensure that we do have a mutually agreed upon plan here? That it's not just the advisor's hubris or the advisors, and I've given this 1,000 times before, here's your bubble gum, that it's really tailored and specific. And so I was so excited to learn about that endeavor, and even more excited to be able to say yes to them when they asked me to come on as a behavioral strategist to start really tweaking how we give reminders, for example. How do we do that in a way that is welcome and doesn't just feel like a nag, like, I said I'd do this for 16 years previous, and now you're telling me I still need to do this. How do we work with that? It's not that people don't know and don't believe that they need to get a will. Like, I think most advisors can, up the argument on that to a point where people will at least nod in the direction of that wisdom. But nevertheless, it's a sticking point for a huge number of North Americans, the majority of whom do not have up-to-date wills. So what do I do about that? And so that's the kind of stuff that I'm excited to get involved with Knudge.
I think the value that really resonates with me is you can have a to-do list, and it's not that things sometimes get forgotten for some people. It's that it really is pushed out of the way. And I just had a recent phone call sitting in the parking lot at the grocery store with a client who told me they were able to do one thing, and we had a long list. I was happy they did the one thing. I was actually surprised because they're in the middle of a family situation that's potentially life and death. But this person still got one thing done, and they were very excited. I said that was great. Didn't bring up anything else. Probably was still in shock that he actually got one thing done. But you want that list, and it's kind of the now, soon, and later. If it's not a now item, you can put it on soon. And if you have a to-do list like Knudge, I guess it allows you to just kind of bank it for a little bit, and we can come back to it because your life just got turned upside down. Might be 3 weeks, might be 3 months, but if it isn't urgent, that's okay. At least it stays on the to-do list. And to be able to effectively manage that as financial planners, I think that's a great service.
It is. And it's not only for advisors and their clients, it's for advisors and the centers of influence or the external referral. Did we make sure that person to whom we referred the client actually got back to the client? Can we nudge ourselves into doing the things that we need to do? And I love your bringing up the now, soon, and later conversation, Ross, because that is, like I said, clients are the experts on their own lives. They're the ones with boots on the ground who are the ones dealing with all of the loveliness and all of the messiness of life. And when stuff is when nudges in this example are being silenced or postponed for a while, that in itself can become an invitation to have the conversation about what's happening. And not in that naggy way, not in that blaming or shaming way, just, hey, I've been thinking about you. I know that you wanted to get to that, and you've determined that you just can't right now. Is there anything I can do for you? What we know is that the more difficult the life transition that the person is experiencing, so if there's grief involved, if there's huge pending loss, if there's just technical complexity, all of those things that push it off the radar. We know that if you give any homework to a client in those circumstances that requires independent follow-through, it's kind of a crapshoot, you're not likely to win, like truly a crapshoot. The odds are against you because there's just so much more. And so for you to see that things are going undone can be a nudge for you to think about, is there a way that I could be making this complex advice simpler? Is there a way that I and my team can be taking over some of these steps for the client. Is there a way that I could get to doing something without this piece of information that I keep asking them for? Do I really need to know their hydro bill for the past 5 years in order to be able to tell them what their retirement spending could look like? Those kinds of things. So helping us to get more flexible in what we do, to realize that, the perfect plan A that was never, ever going to be implemented is a poor second fiddle to the suboptimal plan B that the client actually has juice for, and can get moving on. Because here's what we know again from the research, Ross, that non-implementation begets non-implementation. If you're in park, you're likely to stay in park. It's like some fundamental law of behavioral physics, right? It's like bodies in motion will stay in motion, bodies at rest will stay at rest. Well, what gets a body at rest into motion? That's
right.
Sometimes life does it. Sometimes, pressure from family members, sometimes circumstances do it. Sometimes sometimes motivation wells up in people. Sometimes insight helps, but sometimes it's the presence of a trusted advisor. And so when you can take somebody who's been stuck on something for so friggin' long that they're embarrassed by it or ashamed of it or dispirited, like they think it's too late now. And you can get such people into action. You start to grow a little cape, people really appreciate when you can get them into action.
Yeah, it's excellent. So that's why your book is so important. Love the work that you do. Excited about what Knudge is going to do and see where they go in the future, especially with you on board now. That follow through is everything. So the greatest plan has minimal value if there's no progress and no decision. So appreciate the insight on that. Let's pivot to the final question. You know what it is? It's the magic wand. We always close with the magic wand. This is the Disney certified magic wand, of course, that I swiped from my daughters. If I would give it to you and you could wave it, do anything in the world, what would you do, Moira?
Oh my goodness. I would want to put an extra dose of tenderness in the drinking supply, a willingness for people to stop and take the perspective of other people, and I guess to consider the possibility that that person has tremendous value, even if I disagree with them or, hate what they stand for, all of that stuff, to be able to somehow combine some humility and some tenderness and some commitment to making the world a better place. That's what I would ask for.
And that would be wonderful. Dr. Moira Summers, thanks so much for being on the Shaping Change Show.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Shaping Change with Ross Marino. This show is for general information purposes only and is not intended to provide recommendations or advice. Speak with a legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions. Past performance references are historical and do not guarantee future results. Visit rlsummit.com to learn more.